Welcome to Fly on the Wall podcast. I'm your host, Chris Sonksen, CEO and founder of Church Boom. Here you get to sit in on a live coaching session as I coach pastors through the ministry challenges we all face. If you find this podcast helpful, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share. Hey everyone, welcome to today's podcast. Before we jump into it, I want to remind you that here at Church Boom, we coach pastors and we rescue churches. If you need some executive coaching or man, you just feel like, man, our church is really suffering. It's getting really low in attendance and we just need some help. Man, if you go to churchboom.org, we're here to help. And we would love to help you in any way that we can. Today, we have my good friend, Pastor Jay Matthews from Houston, Texas on the call. And he is just an incredible leader and doing an incredible work in Houston, Texas. And we're talking today about how we build up and empower leaders. How do you identify them? How do you build them up? And how do you empower leaders? Because we all need it. We need leaders in our church. We need to be building them up. We need to be learning about it and growing in that area. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So let's check out the conversation with myself and Pastor Jay. Let's jump into it, man. How can I serve you today? And man, what's on your mind?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you, Chris. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be able to sit down and talk with you. My first question I have for you on today is, what are some effective strategies for developing and empowering emerging leaders within a growing church community? And how can we ensure that they are well equipped for their roles?
Yeah, that's great. You know, the old saying, Maxwell is kind of noted for saying, Jay, that everything rises and falls on leadership. And I think what's really interesting is, I think in the church world, how we know leadership's important, but then we don't ever really create a system by which that leadership happens. So a lot of people leave it to chance. And what you end up, when you leave it to chance, you end up putting managers in leadership positions, which is always a mistake. Because now you're expecting them to raise up leaders, you're expecting them to develop people, but they're not going to. So I think one of the most important things is intentionality. And man, if I was to sum up a word or sum up the idea, is we have to be extremely intentional on how do we actually take a guy or a gal or whatever that's a 4 or 5 and get them to a 6. And where do we get that pipeline from to help them make that happen? Matter of fact, we talk about that quite a bit on Church Boom University is our platform where people can go on there and they can go and learn and go through master classes that we developed. But the short version is we have one on there called Leadership Ladder. And the 2 big things that I always like is, well, actually 3. One is Leadership Ladder goes like this. It goes church, volunteers, leaders, leadership circles, leadership apprenticing. And man, what I find, Jay, is we leave it a lot to chance. So when I look at leadership, okay, so it goes, when I said church, volunteers, leadership circle, leadership apprenticing. So that volunteer one, or that church one, church, volunteer, leader, the leadership one. First mistake I think we make there is that we don't really know if they're leaders before we put them in position. Hey, you're in charge of the greeters, and then we're upset that they don't raise up the teams. Well, they don't raise up teams because they're not a leader. And you never did anything to figure out whether or not they really know how to develop and build up teams. Because the one thing you really want in a church, you want people building teams and building armies of leaders and volunteers. So you want that greeter, that head usher, the head of the whatever. Man, everybody's building teams. Everybody's empowering people. Everybody's going from 4 volunteers to 8 to 12 to 15 because your church will grow when you stop focusing on attendance and start focusing on engagement. And the engagement comes in people starting to get engaged into the life of the church and getting plugged in. And so that one thing, there's a thing I do called task project position. You got to figure out if they can do tasks, that means they're a doer. If they can do a project, the difference between task and project is they can do the task, but they also have to rally people around it. And you want to know, are they good at tasks, so they're doers, but they're also good at project, which means they're putting on an event and they know how to raise up people before you ever put them into a position. In the church world, we go task, skip over project, and put them right into a position. And then we're frustrated that they're not delivering or they're not raising up teams. I've always learned, Jay, it's a lot easier to get someone in ministry than it is to get them out. And
Hey, that's well said.
yeah. People are like, I
Wow,
can't
that's
get people
good.
on my team. Getting people on your team is not the problem. Getting them off
You're
your team is
right.
the problem.
Yes.
So yeah, that's the problem, buddy. And so then you go to the second level leadership circles, and this is a quick version of it.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of the fourth level. So there's 5 levels. The fourth level is leadership circles. I am a gigantic fan of every leader grabbing 5 or 6 people, putting them meeting with them once a month and going through a leadership book together. You got to start creating leadership books together or doing that together. I have a friend of mine that's got a church of about 2,000. He's probably got 450, 500 people in leadership circles.
Wow.
Like they're meeting every month somewhere. Hundreds of people are meeting every month, going through leadership books. How does that not help grow it? Then the 5th level is apprenticing. I think that's the level we miss out on. It's funny to me that if you want to be a plumber in the union, you have to be apprenticed. But we don't do this. You want to be a lawyer, you want to be a doctor. There's some apprenticing program. But for some reason in the church world, we don't do it. Even though Paul did it to Timothy, even though in 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 2, there's 4 generations mentioned in one verse. They're all raising each other up. Yeah. But it's like, okay, but the worship leader, who are you apprenticing to do what you do as good as you do it? The youth pastor, who are you? What's the 1 or 2 people you raising up to do what you do as good as you do it? It is all about that 5th and final level of apprenticing. So that's a way that I do it. We talk about that on Church Boom University. It's a leadership ladder. Everybody's different. Everybody's different, but intentionality, Jay, is the important thing. How do you raise up leaders to that next level? Yeah. And how do you get people? And then let me give you another little twist. That's one side is you got to have the leadership growth and development and opportunity, because if I come to your church and let's say that I'm a 9-level leader, like I'm a sharp leader, and I come to your church and you don't have anything for me except for me to be an usher, like there's no pathway for me to develop in your church, become better in your church, I'm not going to stay around because I'm a natural leader. And I'm like, dude, that's going to bore me. You're going to bore me. And so a lot of guys lose high capacity people because they don't have a pathway for them.
That's good.
You got to have pathway for high level people, not just everybody, but you got it like the 5 levels, but you got to have like, how are you going to get to the next level? So bottom line is, man, have a clear system. I think messages inspire, but systems change behavior. And you gotta create a system that gets people to that next level.
Wow. That's awesome.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you for that. I mean,
absolutely.
That definitely helped me out. My second question I have for you, what are some key principles for maintaining a healthy and unified leadership team? And how do you navigate potential challenges that arise as new leaders come on board?
Yeah. So the first part of that question is, I like the last part is more about navigating. Is it navigating conflict or navigating issues? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Challenges. Yeah. Potential challenges. Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So let me answer the back half of that, and then we'll go to the front half, and then I'll have you read the front half. Navigating challenges. I think sometimes, again, it's kind of a little bit into that first question. I think that we have a tendency to put people in positions of leadership that A, are more managers than leaders, and B, are not at the behavioral maturity to handle being a leader. And so when desperation rises, standards fall. The more desperate you become, the more standard the fall. So we put people into positions because we're desperate. And then once they're in the position, they're over there. They may get upset. They may get irritated. They may whatever. They create conflict. They create challenges. And because we put them into a position where they just don't have any right being there, or they just can't handle it. And so when it comes to challenges, let's talk about the back half of that question. When it comes to challenges, I don't know what specific challenges you're referring to, but normally it's behavioral challenges. Normally it's toxic challenges. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You get someone in leadership that gets a little toxic.
Yeah.
They start talking a little bit. They start sharing a little bit to someone else about the pastor. They start talking to other people about this little problem.
Yeah.
And they start getting a little bit toxic. Man, when you get leaders that are getting toxic, you have to deal with it up front. If you deal with it over here, it'll be tough. If you deal with it over here, it'll be even tougher. Now, most people avoid these tough conversations when they face challenges with leaders. They avoid it because they don't want the conflict and they don't want to deal with the issue and all that. But, bro, I tell you, you pay now or pay later, but if you pay later, you'll always pay more. So you can keep putting it off if you want, but it's going to keep happening. So as a leader, two things. One, you can reduce the amount of conflict and challenges on the back half of that question by putting the right people in the right seat. The second thing you got to do is it's going to happen. There's a Judas at every table. So it's going to happen. So you got to, at some point during that, if you're recognizing that person's drifting, that person's talking about me. I think that person's feeling a little, they're starting to say stuff. Every time I hear something negative, somehow their name is in the middle of it. You got to deal with that early on. Because the longer you wait, the more difficult it will become and the more damage that will happen with that. And one principle you always want to teach your staff and your leaders, Jay, is this, is you might have a problem with me and you might have a problem with another leader. You got to go to that leader at once. But if you feel like you need to talk about it to someone, you need to find someone to talk about it, but not in the church. Here's what people do is you take a staff member or key leader and they talk to 2 or 3 other key leaders in the church before they come to you, or they talk to their buddy that the guy that goes to their church, but they work out on Monday mornings together. And here's what they do is and the rule of thumb is always this: never bring sheep into a shepherd's conversation.
Man, that's good.
You're always going to hurt the sheep that way. So you can have conversations on the outside. Like, man, if I'm dealing with something, or let's say your worship director has an issue and they want to address you about it, but they just need some guidance. Don't get the guidance from someone in the church. Find someone outside the church. Then if you want to get some guidance before you approach whoever, okay, I get that. Just set some rules about, like, we don't go and talk to everybody else. We just don't, because you're going to hurt the sheep. Never bring sheep into a shepherd's conversation. You're going to hurt the sheep every time. And so let's go back to the front half of that question. What was the front half of that question? I want to make sure I get that right.
And let me ask you this. I want to make sure I heard this right. Did you say there's a Judas at every table?
Yeah.
I like that. I've never heard it, but that's good. I just want to make sure I heard that right.
No, there is. And what I think is because even when you have the best people on your team, it's like someone's going to go sour somewhere.
Yeah.
It's not like, man, we ran 28 years in ministry and never had a problem with anybody. It's like, I don't know what people you had on your team, iRobots or whatever, but that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen because people are going to get upset. People are going to get angry. They're going to get all worked up. And, Judas is a strong word, but the bottom line is you're going to get someone at the table that doesn't like it. And what's interesting is sometimes it's some philosophical things. Often it's time when you're moving people around in ministry and they get upset and then they start talking because they're not over here. One thing I always share is like the story of Joseph. He goes to his brothers and shares the dream. And I always share this is that I don't think his brothers had a problem with the dream. They had a problem with their position in the dream. Dream wasn't the problem. The position in the dream was the problem.
Okay, right.
So it's like, no, they don't have a problem with all the great changes we're making in the church. They have a problem with their new position that you just moved them over here. Now they're upset and going to talk to everybody. But you're always going to find toxic people, but you have to catch it early. I always say that you're in front of the 8 ball when they care about the relationship with you. You're behind the 8 ball when they no longer care about the relationship with you. So catch it early. Don't catch it later.
Gotcha.
So important. So what was the front part of that question?
Okay. So what are some key principles for maintaining a healthy and unified leadership team?
Yeah. So one thing for sure is I think that the vision of the church, one thing I always say is people always drift. Vision always drifts and vision always leaks, people always drift. Vision's always leaking, people are always drifting. So you have to, as a leader, say, okay, how am I going to get everybody moving in the same direction? I got to get everybody moving in the same direction, doing the right things. I got to cast vision. I got to keep them on board. And sometimes a pastor will say, oh man, my church, I got some key leaders. They're going this way. They're going that way. Okay, well, maybe it's because you haven't gotten real clear on like, look, this is the way we're going. This is our vision. We got to figure out creative ways to constantly bring up, this is our culture, this is our values, this is who we are, this is where we're headed. Culture is the deepest thing that you're ever going to deal with. But you got to have times where you're celebrating, you got to have times where you're teaching it, times where you're refocusing the entire team. You got to get people focused and moving forward. And I think part of it is being clear on the culture that you're trying to create, being clear on the values, knowing that your vision is never for sale, and that you're always moving down this path and you're figuring out ways to celebrate the culture and the values and who we are. Hey, you celebrate that person over there. That man, you did this. That was great. You're all about, in front of the team. Like, man, look at this person over here. Tom did all this. He's killing it. He gets our culture. This person over here, they get our values. When you don't have that, here's the thing: is that one thing I always talk about is that the power of the riverbanks. You ever been going down a river? I don't know if you ever gone down a raging river. I've once or twice I've done it, and I almost killed myself. But you go down this river, and you're like, and you look over. Next time you're standing in front of a river, have this thought: look out to the river and go, it's moving pretty fast. You and your wife, from whatever you guys are on vacation, you're like, wow, it's a fast-moving river. It's beautiful. The power of the river, Jay, isn't the river. The power of the river is in the riverbanks. Think about it for a moment. Culture, values.
Okay.
You see, the power of the river, it's not in the water.
Yeah.
The power of the river is in the riverbanks. Because watch this. All you got to do is remove the riverbanks, and all you have is a pond.
Wow.
You no longer have a river anymore.
Right.
So people are always like, wow, that's powerful water. I'm like, no, actually, the power of the river is actually the riverbanks.
Man, that's good.
Because once you move them, so in the church world, take a riverbanks at a beautiful big Colorado River, remove the riverbanks, all you have is a pond. Same now, move it into the church. You better have clear culture, clear values. This is where we're headed. We celebrate them. We keep them in front of people. We keep people aligned. The minute you move those, and it's like, well, we have cultures that nobody knows. We have values that are on some wall somewhere that nobody's living out, and we're wondering why our church feels like a pond. That's because you don't have riverbanks. The power of the river's in the riverbanks.
That's good. Never been broken down like that before.
There you go. Now put it in your book.
Oh, yeah. It's in there.
Put it in the book.
It's in there.
Yeah. So anything else? Any last questions?
I got one last question for you.
All right, cool. Let's do it.
All right. What strategies do you recommend for identifying and developing potential leaders from within the congregation? And how do you create opportunities for their growth?
Yeah. So I think we can go. It kind of goes back a little bit. Identifying leaders and then helping them to grow.
Yes.
One is, remember I told you the 5 levels. We'll go back to that: church, volunteer, leader, leadership circle, and leadership apprenticing. I think that developing on the growth, that back part of that question, I think that's answered in number 4 and 5, because you got them in leadership circles. So when I do a leadership circle, I got 4 or 5. I'll invite 4 or 5 people in that I think have potential.
Okay.
Of those people that I think in that group that have potential, I'll move maybe one of them up to apprenticing.
Okay.
To do what I do the way I do it, or, hey, children's pastor, to do what you do the way you do it. I'm sorry, to teach them to do what you do better than you do it. And you got to do that with worship and everything else. That's in that level. But to the identifying question, because I think the back half of that question is answered a little bit in number 4 and 5 on that leadership ladder we talked about earlier. But to that first one, we talked about task, project, position. Let me break that down just a little bit more.
Okay.
Identifying leaders. You got to identify people that are naturally attractional, naturally gravitational. There's likable, capable, and gravitational. Some people are likable. Hey, I like the guy. Some people are capable. He can do it. But some people are attractional. They just bring people around them. You're not looking for the likable. That's usually what we do. I like Tom. Let's make him the leader. It's like, he's likable. I don't want to climb a mountain with the guy, but he's likable, and then go to capable. Okay, he's capable. I mean, he can do the job. He's not, whatever. But is he gravitational? Does he draw people to them? And that's what you're looking at. And then you're looking at this concept of task, project, position. The difference between task and project is task is you can do it on your own. Project, you need other people to do it. The example I always give is, okay, I'm the children's pastor and I'm thinking about bringing on this leader, but we're having this children's workers picnic or something. I don't know. And you tell this person, Tom and Joanne, whatever. Okay, I need you guys to get all the food there and get the bounce houses there, and we're going to have a big party for the children's workers. Dude, they get the food there, the bounce house there, and everything's good. It's like, dude, you give them a task, they do it. Okay, now let's go to project. Okay, I need you to get the food there and the bounce house there, but I also need you to recruit 15 volunteers. Mm-hmm. So they can run the bounce houses and cook the food. I check in with them a week before, and they're like, dude, I can't get anybody. Everybody's busy. I mean, I got my brother helping me and my uncle helped me, but that's about it. That tells me they're really good on task. They're not good on project, which includes recruiting people. Why would I give them a position in leadership? That's why it's called task, project, position.
Wow.
We go task, we skip project and go right over to position. Like I said earlier, it's like, hey, that guy's faithful. He shows up. He got the bounce house. He can do this. He does that. Let's put him as a leader. And then what do? He ends up not being a leader. He's not a leader. But now if I put him without telling him, this is what I literally train this to staffs all across the nation. I'm like, don't tell them you're doing task, project, and position with them. I'm looking over at Jason and I'm thinking, I'm going to give this guy a task. And he does it. And I'm like, this guy's a doer. He can do stuff. Yes. Now I'm going to give him a project, which includes recruiting people. If he can't do that, why would I give him a leadership position?
Yeah.
If he does it, he comes back to me. He's, yep, I got 15. Not only got 15 people, I got 18 people. They got lanyards. And I'm like, dude, how'd you get these 18 people? Half of them never want to serve. I'm like, this guy's clearly is gravitational. Yeah. Now I'm thinking, okay, I think he has potential to be a leader.
Yeah.
But what we do is we only use the barometer or the scorecard of faithful. Tom's faithful. Make him the head usher. Well, he's faithful, but he's not a leader.
Right.
But you got to have something, a beta test without them knowing it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're doing that whole back to the picnic thing. Okay, make sure you get the food there in the bounce house and recruit 15 people. I'm not telling them that I'm watching him, but I am. And if he can do that, I'm like, this guy can do stuff. He gets it done. He executes. And I don't know how he got 18 people, but he got 18 people. Like, okay, now, again, I'm not getting into character and loyalty, and I'm assuming we all kind of know that, but it's this part over here where it's like, you got to make sure the guy knows how to recruit and develop teams. Because at the end of the day, if you put a person in a leadership position, they got to be gravitational and build leaders and build teams. You hand them, here's your 10 volunteers. 3 months later, I want 20. Yeah. 3 months later after that, I want 30. It's like, this guy's just growing this thing.
Right.
But then you put him in, and now it's like he's not doing it, and now you got to have the tough conversation, and he's related to 8 people in the church, and they're all going to be mad at you. And well, it's like we shouldn't have put him in that position to begin with. So
oh, wow.
So you got.
Have you been spying on my church?
I got everybody. They're all emailing me right here.
No, man, that's so good. That's so good. I think every pastor has experienced that. We've made that mistake, placing somewhere too fast. Yeah, like you said, that's the hardest thing is to put them there now to try to remove them. And man,
yeah, well, yeah, getting them in there is not a problem.
Right.
And the thing is like one last thing I'll just say is we just have to keep in mind that often we're putting people into a leadership position in which a large portion of them have never had a leadership position or a leadership title. So you're saying, I'm yanking away their work at the church and they got upset at me. No, you're yanking away their title, which is one they've never had. That's why they're so upset.
Yeah.
They've never had this before. And now all of a sudden, like, man, I got a name, I got a title, I'm so-and-so. And then we wonder, oh man, they're upset because of this. No, they're upset because you stole their title.
Wow. Yeah.
And man, I think we give out titles at churches like candy, where I'm like, stop giving out so many titles. Prove the person can be a true leader. Make it a privilege to be one.
Right.
And it's got to be people that are, remember that thing, gravitational. Do they know how to build up people? Do they know how to build up teams? And I'm telling you, when I do mission criticals, I executive coach people, mission criticals with their staff or whatever, I tell them all the time, look, if this person cannot raise up teams, do not hire them to be a leader on your team. And the one thing I always say is years ago, I had an opportunity to speak at a Catalyst conference, and backstage was a bunch of guys, and Andy Stanley sitting next to me, guru, and he's got a youth pastor with a youth group of like 2,000 kids or something crazy. And I'm like, hey man, your youth pastor, boy, I hear he's amazing. Oh, he's great. Oh, he does this. Oh, he's awesome. He's the best. I go, man, he must be a great communicator. And he goes, oh no, he's horrible. I'm like, what? I go, wait a minute, hold on. Your youth pastor that is blowing it up and like got this massive ministry, he's horrible at speaking. He goes, I didn't hire him to speak. I hired him to lead.
Wow.
And I was like, whoa.
Right. That's good.
Isn't that great? He's so he doesn't speak on Wednesday nights at the youth group. He goes, no. He raises up teachers, raises up worship teams, has 200 volunteers, structures it, creates outreach. He goes, he's up here just moving all the pieces around. He goes, I don't need him to speak. He's not good at speaking, but I didn't hire him to speak. I hired him to lead. And so he looked at me. He's like, quit hiring youth pastors because they can speak. Hire leaders first above anything else. And he goes, and it won't matter. He goes, because they can blow up the children's ministry. They can blow up the youth ministry. It doesn't matter if they can talk in front of people. And I thought about like leaders over the years of my life that I've known, that I've had on staff that were natural leaders. I'm like, I could have put that guy anywhere.
Yeah.
He would have just blew up whatever you gave him, he would have made it happen. Whether he could speak in front of youth or children or not is not the point.
Right.
He's just a flat out leader.
You're right.
And Andy Stanley's like told me, he goes, hire leaders and watch what'll happen to your church. He goes, it'll just go. And so anyway.
Man, that's
all right, brother.
Man, listen, I thank you. You have given me, man, just thank you for sharing your wisdom. I mean, this is awesome. I can't wait to just go back and dissect this whole thing. Man, this is, I didn't expect anything less. This is always when I get in your presence. Awesome. Man, it's just so, I'm talking about, man, educational, and you always blow it out the water, man.
Oh, you're awesome. You're too kind, dude. Love you guys, man. Sir. Tell your wife I said hello. Sure do love you guys, man. Thanks for being on today, buddy.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your time, man. Have a good one.
Okay, we'll see you. Thank you for tuning in to the Fly on the Wall podcast. We hope today's episode provided you with some practical steps to lead your church to the next level. If you found this episode helpful, take a moment to leave us a review and share it with others. Remember, when the pastor grows, the church grows, and we grow pastors. We love you. We're your raving fans, and we are cheering you on. See you next week.